And it's funny because we know that world's fake. And we know that world's fake, and we look at it and we still want it.
Yeah.
Because look how great they're doing. We know it's fake. We know that
Yeah.
there's filters. We know that there's whatever on there. But we go, but look at how happy they are. Bull. They're not happy.
Wait, you mean the camera's not rolling all the time and you can just choose what you want to put out?
You know, this is going to get edited too.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
We gotta work on the problems. We gotta link up to solve them. We gotta keep on evolving. Gotta be side by side. Give it up. Gotta be side by side. Everyone. Gotta be side by side. Yeah. We gotta be side by side.
Hey everybody, welcome to Talks with Tatum, another side-by-side podcast. So happy to have you here. And today we have a really, really special guest, a longtime friend of mine who is an incredible person, a jack of all trades, gifted in so many different avenues, and just a thoughtful, kind-hearted, I'd call him a teddy bear, you know? But Pastor Zane Whorton. So
How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. I'm happy to have you.
I'm still stuck on that teddy bear image now. I'm trying to figure out if it's a bow tie, if it's like a Winnie the Pooh, no pants, just
I don't
a shirt.
know. I'm seeing like a vest, you know, no pants, of course, because
Right.
they don't wear pants, but a nice
Right.
vest.
I don't have
and
pants on right now.
a
We're
bow
just kinda
tie.
working through
Oh,
that.
don't look under the table. But a funny story to kick it off. We used to do camp together.
Yep.
And I had met you before at some type of event, but I really didn't know you at that point. And we were co-counselors at a camp, and to kick off the morning time, I walk up and I'm sleepy and preparing my brain to deal with these teenagers, right? And
Yeah.
I hear laughter and singing and all of this stuff coming from the campfire area, and you're there and you're leading in this song story
Yeah.
going on a lion hunt.
Going on a lion hunt. Got my shotgun. Hopefully that's not controversial for anybody that we're listening to right now. Going on a lion hunt, got my shotgun. And I'm not afraid.
You're not afraid. I'm not afraid.
That's right.
And you had all of these kids so captivated, and that's a huge part of your personality. I mean, camp is a huge part of your history and a huge part of where your passion lies. But where did that kind of originate from?
From my mom. She is the one that made me go that first year. I didn't want to have anything to do with it, and she made me go, and I wasn't even happy about it. But then that just continued, and then getting into a high school setting with the camp and realizing that there was a chance for leadership, there was a chance for my voice to be heard in a way that it hadn't been heard before. In the church I grew up in, we didn't really have a youth. It was like myself and like one other person that were really in the high school all the way through. So we didn't really have a youth group.
Right.
And so that council and the friends that I made through camp really did become a youth group. And, there's some of them I still talk to now.
Wow.
We work that just kind of, maybe here or there, kind of different pieces. But yeah, there's some they're really close to that still work through that time. So, yeah.
I mean, camp is so sacred. Like I didn't get to grow up
Right.
having those camp experiences. Like my parents were always like, "Yeah, we can't afford that," and so I just knew better than to ask at a certain
Right.
point, right?
Right.
But my first year in internship at Broadway, somebody called the church and was like, "Hey, we need another counselor." Blah blah blah. Like the day that camp started, that the counselors were due to report, right?
Right.
And me being an intern, they're like, "Okay, we need you to go."
Right.
And I'm wearing like jeans and a button down and like loafers, and I've barely scrambled together stuff to go. And I show up and I have no idea what I'm walking into.
Right.
And it was like this transformational experience. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I want to do this all the time. And I wish I had that experience as a kid.
Yeah. And for me, what it is that you have this real intentionality for that week. Everybody is invested in getting to know everybody else, and everybody is invested in really exploring what a relationship with God looks like. And when it is, and it's different than the church setting, which means I can be there and I can be involved in the church with all the different activities I'm involved in, with the worship setting I'm involved in, and I can have some really powerful experiences in worship. But at the end of that, I go home and separate from that group. Where within a camp setting, you have, whether it be a 5-day camp, whether it be a 3-day camp, whatever, you are with each other. You are, somebody is sleeping on top of you in a bunk bed that you are learning to walk and share God with in a way that most don't get to have that experience because they're just not. It's so foreign of thinking about what that could be, and then you add the word camp. Well, what does that mean? Like, well, we didn't camp. We were in cabins with air conditioning, and some camps don't do that. But we were not in backpacks. We did not have tents. We were not worried if it rained.
Yeah.
We didn't have that, but it's just that experience of being with each other. I think really is really what camp. Why it's as special as it is. It's not really the place as much as it is what happened at that place. It's the people who talk. It's the things, the stories that were shared. It was those things, kind of aha moments that you either pick up as a camper or a counselor working with. As you were talking about, you kind of you get kind of thrown into it, like what just happened. And hopefully that's good. Sometimes we get somebody that gets thrown into it going, I wasn't ready for that at all. I was ready to teach. I wasn't ready to be vulnerable. And you learn real quick that you got to be vulnerable in those settings as well, too. Yeah.
I mean, there's so much sacredness to it, right? Like and there's like deep spirituality. It's the reason why a monastery works. Right. It's this idea of like this full commitment to the people, that community, but also like to grow in that relationship with God.
Right.
And it's communal in that way. And like so much of camp, I mean, obviously God flows through all of it, but there's so much of camp that's not really about God in that way. I mean, you're eating, some of the conversations that you have, some of the games that you play, all these things are not really about God, but the community piece and the fellowship piece ties God to all of it. And man, week to week, those kids emerge completely different people.
From beginning to end, you see a major transformation, and if the counselors are honest within them too. So that's what I stress that so much. That it's not the counselors come because they know they have a responsibility, but the reason they keep coming is that they find out they learn stuff as well too, and that they're brought into that. The kids are learning as well too, but it's exactly that. It's not because it is nothing but Bible study the entire time. It's because we are doing stupid songs that have no point to anything. And for some of those kids, they would never dream of doing that song in any other situation. I always have this, like, just this devious, wicked side of me that wants to show up, like, to where I know some of those kids are going to school at and just start busting out that song and, like, call them in. Like, you know this song. You come over here and you help me. Like, just to solidify the reality that we live in, that sometimes the realities that we face ourselves in are not where we are the most free. Yeah. It's free to be ourselves. And that's what those camp settings do, is that they actually allow all of the pretense to go away and go, you can't be somebody when, man, dude, I heard you snoring. I don't care how cool you think you are. I heard you talk in your sleep. I know what you're like when you're grumpy. Dude, you were homesick or whatever. I know that. And if you are somebody who's continued to grow up in that camp setting, you come back every year and you got people who can call you on your crap going, no, dude, go, hold on. But doing it in a way that is so intimate, and that's a scary word to use, but so intimate that you're okay with it.
Yeah, of course.
That it's not, I'm uncomfortable. It's that somebody who can call me out because they actually do know me.
So. Yeah, it's so relational in that way. One of the cool things about camp is it's really that low barrier of entry. We talked about it a little bit before, but having this low barrier of entry that kids just engage on a fun level. And it's really kind of cool. Like, in my experience, there's always different adults that are kind of pulled in that haven't either had that experience before or that are, like, newer to church stuff in general. And, like, it's a low barrier of entry for them, too. It's an opportunity to plug in, and it really becomes interesting relationships on an adult level. Which is my favorite piece of it, right? I mean, the kid stuff is great. And getting to watch those kids grow from year to year. But the adult relationships, I mean,
from an adult relationship place, it is one of the few places that you can have again, I'm going to use the word intimacy because it is so revolutionary to how we normally live our lives.
Yeah.
You start talking about adults having intimate relationships, and it brings in every other image that is so far removed
Yeah.
from what intimacy actually entails, of being true, of being honest, of being vulnerable, and to put them in a spot where they're having to engage some of the things they are uncomfortable with, whether that be a ridiculously gross, messy game that we're doing and going, I have to decide whether I'm going to engage in that or not, whether it is the idea that on some level I'm going to have to teach something with that, whether it is I have to have absolute silence when I sleep, and I'm not going to have that, or I have to have a mattress that is exactly, whether it is a memory foam or a Tempur-Pedic or whatever I got that has to recline in so many ways, and I've got a pad and a wooden board underneath me.
Pad is generous.
I didn't say how big of a pad. I just said pad. The smart ones bring their own, and then you go from there. Or the experienced ones bring their own. But all of that entails into what that intimacy really brings out. That doesn't happen, unfortunately, anywhere else in our culture, even in places where it maybe should. Even in some cases in home, we stay guarded, whether it be between parents and kids can have a guarded, intimate relationship. The church should be a place where we do that, but we're not always invested in that same way. So a church should be a good entryway, and some churches are and do that really well, but not always. And so so you're right, having this real low entry barrier that is fun, but even in that low entry barrier also sets the expectation of this is what we want from each other. So.
And I mean, the week beats you down, right? Like you find a lot of people, kids included, in those first couple of days. I mean, they're gonna keep up the walls, but like through the course of the week, there's a moment that God's gonna say, "Get down here, okay? Okay, you need to fully immerse yourself in this." And there's vulnerability, and it's fun to track that and all of the people there and get to watch it. From moment to moment, from day to day, and then ultimately from year to year. And like you said, church is supposed to be that place that we can strip those things. And I'm happy that church camp can continue to be that kind of space, even when the institution doesn't always succeed at that. And so your experience with the church camp piece, how does that lead you into your call ultimately? Or is there any relationship there?
The relationship is there, but it's hard to distinguish.
Yeah.
Because I've wrestled with that question so many different times. Because at some point, and this sounds cheesy, but at some point, at least in my life, it just becomes part of who you are. And where that happens becomes fuzzy. And I don't mean that in a dangerous way. I don't mean that in a way of going, my only identity is within camp or is within being a pastor. But it just becomes such a part of the story to say that this leads to this, to this leads to that. I mean, that's like trying to track down like 87 chapters of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and go like 20 minutes and go, hey, here's what you need to know. They're so interlaced. But what I think, if there's got to be one overarching thing that relates them, is that it is, how do you invite people into a place where they feel comfortable? And that's where I see what camp does, and that's what I pray. Leader is not just within camp counselor, but now I have a different role now within camps where it's the same role, but now being kind of over camps. Where now we're also teaching directors how to create those spaces and watching directors in a way and counselors in a way of going, this was really cool, and seeing that excitement. So that mentorship that comes down, and how do you lead this, and how do you advocate for, and how do you acknowledge those things that transfers over into the church, because now I can say, okay, when we train people to do this, like, hey, I had a really good relationship with, or a really good talk with my coworker, my kid, my parent, my spouse, my neighbor, who we haven't been able to talk, or we just did something that was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So as you make the transition into ministry, you get your call, you've started this whole process.
Yeah.
How's that evolved for you over these years of doing ministry, from what you thought it was going to be at the very beginning to what it's turned into?
I think everybody has in their head what a minister is, whether it be through TV, pop culture, whatever. And Ian, my son, will ask me sometimes, he'll always ask me, how did your day go? Because that's just what we do in the car, back and forth. And then sometimes he'll ask, what did you do today? And there are sometimes I have to look at him and go, I don't know, but I spent all day doing it. And it's the amount of work that is, and this is what is different than camp, the amount of work that is unfinished, the amount of work that may never see closure, the amount of work that is just progressively and continually walking with somebody, or dealing with an issue, or dealing with tragedies or responsibilities or joys or hopes. And there can be times where every day you come into the church and it's busy with something. And there can be days where I have a lot of time to read and reflect.
Yeah.
And it goes in these weird cycles, and you can't really say hit or miss which one it is. But it is really finding out that being in those moments and being available, whether that is preaching at a nursing home and working with that, or like the other day I was helping out with doing mock job interviews at the high school, that I don't ever have the same job day to day to day to day. It's not just Bible study. It's all over the place. And so, and like my wife, who goes in and has a great work, but she knows what she's going to have to deal with and do that. And there's some expectation, and there's some surprises along the way, but we pretty well know this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
I can come in with going, that's it, but God comes in and goes, no, you're talking to this person all day. Works
Talk about getting hijacked for Jesus
exactly
all the time.
Exactly.
But there's a person that really thrives in that type of some of the spontaneity of it, but also just like how creative you're able to be
Right.
In those spaces. And it's constant variety all the time. And
Right.
It's constantly people throwing things at you and requiring you to be present, requiring you to have ideas and a path forward. And there's only certain people that thrive in that place.
Yeah.
And that's probably one of the reasons that burnout is so high,
Yeah.
among pastors. And one of the reasons that it's really hard to get, a great one is the desires and the skills and the energy of the pastor has to align with those things that the congregation is needing. And that's tough.
It is.
It's a tough marriage.
It's a tough marriage, and there are different pastors who handle that differently. Some are some can categorize a lot better than others. Some they let that creativity go full on. Some are more emotionally invested. I probably am one of the ones that are more emotionally invested.
Yeah.
My day very much depends on, and my mood going home very much depends on what was the attitude of the people I was around that day.
Yeah. And
being careful to not let that be, that wasn't my attitude. That was just what was going on in the situation that was there.
Right.
And that's tricky in working through that and be able to handle it, and not taking signs of concern or signs that are pleas for help as personal attacks. That's a real tricky waters to maneuver, and sometimes I'm good at it, sometimes I'm not.
Well, it feels so very personal, right?
It is, yeah.
I mean, I was talking with a pastor friend of mine, and it feels like sometimes that people forget that we're humans.
Yeah.
And I had a moment, where I was just kind of going through stuff, and I had a rough Sunday. Last Sunday was a incredibly tough Sunday, just because of stuff that was happening at my home church. And I had done a worship earlier that morning, and I had cried in between leading songs, I'd cried, between every single song. And then I cried the 30-minute drive to my church. And I wanted to be anywhere but there, right? And at the end of the service, I told him, I was like, here's what my days look like. This is probably the hardest Sunday I've ever had.
Right.
And I wanted to be anywhere but here. I didn't feel God in any of it. And then I stepped in this place, and I felt the Spirit calling me, and I felt a congregation hold me through all of it. And I felt God hearing my cries and pouring love and compassion over me. And I got to feel my people give me the energy that I needed to make it through the thing.
Right.
And I got to acknowledge that with them at the end of the service and let them know how much I needed them and get to just be vulnerable and naked with them.
Sure.
And just authentic.
Sure.
And it was so appreciated in both ways that I got to be just a human. Mm-hmm. They got to hold me in that, but also that they got to see I am just a human.
Right. Right.
Beyond all of the other stuff, getting to meet people in the worst moments or the best moments of their life.
Right.
We still have to navigate our own life. Right. On top of that, right?
Yeah, between kids, and we were talking about earlier about picking up kids just a little while ago, and working all those things and trying to get that worked in. And I do consider myself blessed because as you're talking about that with the congregation, the congregation here has seen things that I can do really well, and they've seen things that I need to work on.
Yeah.
And holding that into accountability lovingly is really good. So I have that, which I'm really blessed to have. On top of that, I have a loving wife who is not afraid to be blunt.
Yeah.
And there are times where I feel like where I'm not doing things right or I'm doing that, and I can get very seriously and very lovingly, would you knock it off?
Would you knock it off?
Yeah, exactly. Or you're not a failure, or stop that, or this is what's going on. That's not the case. And, it's the I'm proud of you or the I love you and the people around you're doing your best. Mm-hmm. Having those voices, whether it comes from, I love it when it comes from Kim. I love it when it comes from my boys, whether it is asking, like I said earlier, how'd your day go? And they're actually investigating it, like, well, how'd you do that? And do that? Those questions, or from the congregation who know those things are important and they're real, and being able to ask those in a way that is completely uplifting, and it also is genuine and honest at the same time. We want you to know you're cared about.
That's special.
Yeah, it is. And so I'm glad to have it.
So we talked a little bit about church camp and this idea of community.
Yeah.
But the church as a whole is supposed to be community. It's supposed to be tied into the community, and it's supposed to represent community. Is there a way that you're living out that ministry?
We've got a few different things going on, and some things that I'm excited about, and some things that we have done that I enjoy as well too. One of the markers for this church and this community is the living activity that it does, and it's a big deal. We still did it during 2020 during COVID, and normally when we do the living activity, we have like downstairs, we got people helping everybody get dressed. We run about 4 different shifts. We got the meal, we got all those things going on, and then COVID hit. And we went, okay, so how do we do this in a way that still helps out the community? And what we had enough people who said we do 2 shifts each. So instead of doing 30 minutes, they did an hour. They came in early, they got their costumes, they took their costumes home, and then they arrived ready to go in costume. And so that when the next group came in, they just came in and did it, and the other group went on and put their stuff up downstairs and went on.
Right.
So they didn't have any of the issues as far as distancing. And the community responded so well to that, of going, thank you. Thank you for keeping something that we know that is a marker in the community, even if we never have stepped foot in your church. Thank you for keeping something that was a marker in our community continuing to go and continuing to happen. And so that was big. And so how you have impact with that. And so taking that same idea and then going, how do how do you minister to the community differently than you minister even within the local congregation? And then COVID hit as well too, and then everybody is all of a sudden, everybody is a televangelist, whether it's through Facebook or whatever. And I found that changed the way I preached as well too, because now I'm not just preaching to this congregation. I'm preaching now in a different way to the community, because there's other people who are doing that. I walk into a restaurant, hey, that's the guy that's on Facebook all the time. I love that. I love the concept of that, of going, the preaching can really go beyond the walls now of how we look through that. So that was big. I'm gonna declare something that's top secret that not many people know about this.
Lay it out.
Angel Wings Clothing Closet here in Mexico is a great organization. They do they're a foster care center, and they have if you are a foster family, you can call them at any time of the night, and they'll have their store open. And as long as you have the paperwork, you can come in and shop for free for the clothes that you need for the foster kid that you came in with. Ooh, okay. So it's a really cool program. They've got a lot of things that they do, but they do an Easter egg hunt. Now, I'm not going to be able to work with this year, but I have for the last previous ones. But they can have anywhere to like 90 kids, and every kid gets a personalized Easter basket. And when I say Easter basket, I mean like a laundry basket of toys, clothes, whatever. And there's an Easter bunny there that is like top notch. That has served proudly during that time, and he's not going to be able to do it this year. They're going to have a fill-in for him, but I may be that Easter bunny.
I was going to say, I wonder who that Easter bunny is.
That's top secret information, and so only your viewers will know that. But that's fun. And what was fun about it was sometimes having people from the church come in, and that's silly. Mm-hmm. It may not have any impact on people coming into the church doors. Yeah. But so what? There's somehow a connection there that we can, that we say that we still have. There's a draw. There's something fun. It doesn't have to be anything dynamic. It's a costume. But being able to be silly with it and knowing that they've got somebody that can do that, I enjoy doing that. Mm-hmm. But the one that's coming up, I'm really excited about, is that there is a transitional housing piece coming up in Mexico that they've started up, and they're allowing people to stay there who maybe have some type of income, and they have to have an income to be able to stay there, whether that is Medicare or Medicaid, whether it's disability, whether it's a job they have, but it's still not quite enough to make ends meet. So they're having trouble with rent, they're having trouble with utilities, they don't have a place to stay. Summit is having people stay there, and a lot of them do have mental health issues that they're staying that live there. But while they're there, they can stay there for up to a year to try to get housing and do that. But in order to stay there, they have to improve some aspect of their life while they're there. Okay. It's not set, and so they interview and they kind of get people together and they think, okay, what are some goals that you have that you want to work on? What are some things that you can do? So we've been talking with Summit here at the church, or I have been, and been talking to the board a little bit more here, and they're excited about this, about what if our church became a place where, as we find out what the needs are, not just to say, hey, we're going to offer this and you come sign up for it, but to say, as we really get to know what the needs are, we can figure out, can we offer a way to teach that? So maybe it is, I don't interview well. I don't know how to get the job. My resume is not really good. Well, we've got people here that have either ran their own business, manage a business, they're supervisors, they've done interviews, that we could do mock interviews here. Right. We could help you beef up your resume so that it looks better. Maybe it's, I don't know how to cook, I don't know how to shop in a way that's budget friendly. Right. I may know how to buy like microwave meals, but that gets expensive really quick. Yeah. And so, okay, we have people here who can teach you how to cook on a budget. We've got people here who had bigger families. We can teach you that, how to shop, how to build pantry staples. It may be I need to just know how to balance a checkbook. It may just be that. It may be I need to know how to change the oil in my car. But we've talked with it to go whether or not, in some cases we might be able to do it there at Summit. In some cases it may be we need to bring you here because we do have a bigger kitchen, or we do have some different things we can do with that. Right. And I'm excited about that. And what's even more is that as we've been talking about it with people in the church, they're getting excited about it because it comes like, oh, if that we could, the one of the ones that I hadn't even thought of the other day that came up was we could maybe show how to buy some of the clothing for the interview if we went out to Goodwill or we went out to one of the clothing pantries here, like seconds to go or secondhand, that we could actually go, here's what you need to look for so that when you go to the interview, this is what would be appropriate to wear versus not being appropriate to wear.
Right.
It could be something as simple as we don't even really need to do anything that's a necessity. It's, I always wanted to know how to make grandma's sugar cookies. And so we've got grandmas here that can make sugar cookies. It may not be their grandma's, but it's going to be close. So here's some sugar cookies that we have. It could just be fun. Like we were talking about earlier, that low bar entry of we just want something to do. We kind of want to learn how to cook. And what was great when I was talking to the director of the facility is that one of the things we talked about is helping people, especially when they feel like they are in what can be a hopeless situation or a very low hope, to go, I can do something. I can do this.
Yeah.
And how cool would that be for this to be the church that people recognize it and go, that's the church that helped me.
X, Y, or Z.
Yeah, whatever that is. That's the church that helped me do this. There's recognition within the church that goes, that's the group of people who cared enough about me to make sure I knew I could do this. I want to, hopefully, maybe I want to go there. If not, okay. But having that mutual relationship that goes, that's a group of people that cared about me, and that's a group of people that loved me so much that they didn't just give me something. They didn't just give me money for the hotel room, which is important, but it wasn't just that. It wasn't just they gave me clothes, or they just gave me food.
Yeah.
It was they took the time to actually walk with me to show me how to do this, and now I can do this with it. The confidence that builds.
Powerful.
Right. And the spirituality that comes with that of going, okay, I'm okay. I'm all right. I can, this is what I know. These are the people I know who care about me. I'm not out here as alone as I thought I was.
And you're talking about people that have historically dealt with issues of mistrust and institutions that haven't supported them and haven't been behind them. And to reform that image and reshape it,
Right.
Without wanting anything in return,
Right.
that's powerful.
Yeah. And just to be able to go, we just want you to know you're cared for.
I love
Crazy
that.
thoughts like, we just want you to know that God loves you. I mean, ridiculously crazy expectations. But for some, those actually are, because they've never heard that before. Or they may have heard it, but they've never had reason to believe it, because there was nothing else there.
Yeah. The hardest part with all of that stuff is just showing up, right? And having that partner that's willing to show up and willing to be whatever support that you need.
Right.
That's the thing that propels a lot of these ministries, because the stopping point is like always resources.
Right.
It's like skills and abilities.
Right.
Like I don't have the talent or the skills or ability or the resources to take that next step.
Right.
And so having a partner that can come alongside you and say,
And
here's
that's
all the things we
beautiful
can...
thing. Right. And that's
yeah.
the beautiful thing about this is that you don't, from the church standpoint, we don't have to have a lot of money invested in this.
Right.
We don't have to have, everything I listed off that I could say that we could do confidently. We're not missing key people to be able to do some of that. We're not missing facility issues to do that. We have that. How do we use it?
And that makes a world of difference.
Right.
This idea of being mission-minded is what you're really talking about.
Right.
It's beyond just investing in the community, and it's analyzing who are we,
Right.
and what does it really mean to be a child of God and to really live in the image of Jesus, right? And that's transformational stuff, to change from being, because I think about church, and for all the good that we do, church is, in a lot of ways, it's self-gratifying.
Yeah.
The way that we're structured, kind of some of the ministries that we do, the way that we structure worship and some of these other stuff, it's like,
Right.
it makes us feel good and like we can kind of check things off our box. But it's really the mission stuff that we do where
Right.
we're really serving people and frankly serving people outside of our own congregation and community that we really get our cup filled and really get that passion kind of flowing and that energy toward Jesus. So is this just the start of some of that mission stuff for you? Do you have desire to like...
Yeah. Yes, no, maybe. Because this is so early on
Yeah.
that I don't know where this goes. But what I love about this, like I was saying earlier, is that even talking about it, I'm going, ooh, from the people who are invested at the resource center, to people who are in the church, to myself, it draws an awareness and a connection that goes, that's what we should be doing. And you're not, even if they can't put that into words, and that is that it just resonates.
Yeah.
That is a glimpse of the kingdom. And earlier when we were talking about camp, the reason camp works is because you get this really tight, impactful week that is a glimpse of the kingdom of God. When a church service just sings, ooh, and it just hits on those days where there wasn't like, where the planning all was there, but somehow it all worked in ways that I didn't expect to work.
Yeah.
That's a glimpse of the kingdom. When people come in and tell you stories because there's no reason for them to have to tell you the story, there's no reason for them to want to connect to you,
Yeah.
and they do it, that's a glimpse of the kingdom. Our youth, the youth program we have where we work with the Presbyterian church, the Methodist church in town, has kids that come in, and in some cases, we're the only ones that care about them. And they are telling really, really rough stories. And they're sharing it here because there are people that are hearing the stories and are not getting so mad at them for telling the story of what is going on, or are not reacting in ways that they're used to reacting, that we're actually excited to see them for whatever horrific story they're telling, or frankly, whatever action they're giving. The next week when they come in, man, we're excited to see them.
Yeah.
and they get that. And those are glimpses of the kingdom. It's a quick little whoop, and it's gone. It is the Emmaus story when the disciples finally recognize after they break the bread, there's Jesus, and whoop, he's gone. They see a glimpse, and then it's there. But that glimpse is so big and so powerful that they can't help but go, this is what it should be.
Well, those are those moments that,
Right.
frankly, who we are, like, surpasses what we do.
Right.
Right. And who we are as children of God.
Right.
And created in that image and molded and shaped by God. And that is the definition of us. And it serves to impact every single lane that we ever step in.
Right. A good friend of mine talks about, when we have those experiences, those mountaintop experiences where we can have that, there's a phrase that we always use, and he says we need to stop using this phrase. He goes that we end up having to go back to the real world. So we leave camp, we go back to the real world. It doesn't matter how great the church experience is, we got to go back to the real world. And he says the reality is those glimpses are what the real world of God really is, and everything else is the distraction. And so what we're going back to, in some ways, can be the distraction. That doesn't mean your family is a distraction. It doesn't mean work is a distraction. But the way that we have compartmentalized it, and the way that we've said we can't have that experience here because that's church and this is work, or that's camp and this is back home, or this is the retreat or the revival or the concert or the wherever I went to, and I felt really good about it. And man, I wish I could have that all the time. Monday's coming, or whatever excuse we give. No, God's world looks at it and goes, no, that was all real.
Yeah.
That moment you had with your family over the weekend where you all were connecting, that's actually what's real. It's everything else that you have put above me, that you don't even always intend to do, but you do, that you go back and you get distracted by it. And some of it has to be done.
Yeah, of
It's
course.
just the part of living in a broken world. Some of it
Yeah.
has to be done because of what we have. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that is what is more real than these spiritual experiences that we're going through.
And it happens probably more in a church context than we'd like to admit. This idea of, like, especially if we can acknowledge that those spiritual high moments happen,
Right.
then we acknowledge that there's something in what we're doing that doesn't work. Now, we don't think about it that way. We're
Right.
like, oh, this is when it works. But in reality, our religion gets in the way of our faith a lot of the times.
Right.
And when it's those few and far between moments that the Spirit kind of speaks through and we get that glimpse of the kingdom, then we got to do some shaking up so that we can see that glimpse of the kingdom all the time. And then it translates. Then it translates to all the stuff that we're doing. So,
Or the flip side of that, which is even worse, is we go, that was a glimpse of the kingdom. We've got to do that again.
oh yeah, it's not
And
that.
so we're just mass producing. We're trying to
Exactly.
mass produce a spiritual moment that can't be mass produced
Yes.
because just like you can't mass produce, your kid's first steps, or you can't. But we try, and especially in the age of digital cameras and everything else we got going on, we miss our first steps. Oh, I'm going to record it, and we'll say that was the first steps. When we know darn
Yes.
good and well that that's not what it was, but these are the ones we got on camera.
But the moment happened in the first place because of intention, because
Right.
of being present, because of that authentic moment. And instead of chasing the elements that made it happen, instead of chasing that way of being, we just chase the outcome. And that's our nature
Right.
anyway. It's the instantaneous, like, we'll just keep doing that again.
Well, and that's Western culture for sure.
Yeah.
Where especially within how a lot of the church that we know has developed in, it's product and not the relation.
Yeah.
And we miss that. It's the program that's going to bring in more people. It's and that is what I am careful about and want to be careful about, even with this idea of what our church could go into, that if this becomes a program that we offer, which is why I don't want it to be, we're going to offer these classes and you come do them. It's no, the relationship piece really is, where do you need help? And can we do that? Are we the ones that can do that? And if we're not, who do we connect you with that can? And being okay with that. Being okay with the idea of going, we may not be the ones who can, but we know where to go. And that's part of the relationship piece as well too.
Yeah.
And we know how to bring that in.
And that's what ministry is. Ministry is relational, period.
Right.
And so it's this idea of those relationships. It's this idea of, how can I meet you where you're at and provide whatever you need. It's not about really what I want,
Right.
per se. It's about me showing up for
Right.
other people. And I trust that I'm invested in other people. And I trust that God is invested in me.
Mm-hmm.
And I trust that that same investment that I give in other people is going to come back to me. It's this idea of team, right? We talk about like when you're clinging, right? You have all these fingers facing you. But if you pass the ball and everybody passes the ball,
Right.
suddenly now you're getting it twice as much, 3 times as much, 5 times as much as you ever did before. But you have to have that intention of being willing to
Right.
pass, being willing to show up for each other, being willing to invest in other people. And we're
that,
scared.
And that vulnerability is that you've got to be willing to fail too.
What's failing?
I know. I don't know I have no idea. No, I'm well too aware of what
This is
it
an
is.
Instagram world. What's failing?
Right, exactly. And that's part of it, is that's another prime example of, and it's funny because we know that world's fake. And we know that world's fake, and we look at it and we still want it.
Yeah.
Because look how great they're doing. We know it's fake. We know
Yeah.
that there's filters. We know that there's whatever on there. But we go, but look at how happy they are. Bull. They're not happy.
Wait, you mean the camera's not rolling all the time and you can just
Right.
choose what you want to put
Right.
out?
This is going to get edited too. And that's not, and so that's part of what we look at, is that there are these moments of that we are so conditioned, I think, to look for what is good or what looks good or what is good for me, that the word failure can't possibly be in that, because that means something's bad if I failed. But the kids that we come through and the church members that come through and the work that we do is that sometimes we've got to be able to own this didn't work.
Yeah.
It's not that it's bad. It's just it didn't work.
Yeah.
We go from, but we're too ready to go. But I don't want to do that. I don't want to risk looking foolish when it doesn't work.
Well, how do you grow from it if you don't ever acknowledge that it didn't work? And in what you're saying, not associating bad or good with anything, but associating this didn't serve its intended purpose.
Right.
And maybe I can repurpose it to be something else, and maybe I have to start from the ground up, and either one of those things is okay.
Right.
It's this idea of, is something an obstacle or is it an opportunity?
Right. One of the did a mock interview yesterday, so Thursday, and one of the high school students I was interviewing, one of the questions we asked is, what motivates you? And the response I got back was the fear of failure. And I was like, stop. So I broke character for a minute and said, I'm going to challenge you to find a way that lets you feel good about the work that you do and lets you always want to put your best foot forward. That is not fear-based. That is not based on this idea of what happens if I fail. Instead of looking at it going, this is what's going to happen if I keep my word. This is what's going to happen if I show up. This is what's going to happen if I actually do this like I said I was going to. That still is a drive to make sure that we put our best forward, but it is so much bigger than, I don't want to screw it up. Because then fear of failure means, even though I have this motivation, I could have a motivation to never fail, but that could also motivate me to, I'm not doing that.
Exactly.
Because I could fail at it, instead of going, but what if we did? What if we did do this? What if we did take a chance on some of these people? And that's the big thing. What if we did take a chance on these people? Which is what I think God does with us. What if I do take a chance in my creation of actually being able to do what I know that it can do within what the creation was to begin with? I made you. I know what you're capable of. I know what you can't do. But what if you actually could do what I think you can?
Rob Bell tells a story that I learned really, really early on as a kid, and it's parents. They're walking on the beach with their kiddo, and he's picking up these broken seashells, and they see a starfish out there, and they tell the kid to go get the starfish. And he goes part of the way out there, and he comes back, and they're like, Go get it, it's yours. And finally, he gets all the way out there, and he comes back. And they say, what's going on? Like, it's yours, go get it. And then he opens up his hands, and they're just full of these broken seashells. And we cling so tight to this idea of what we want to give people, of how we want to change people, instead of letting go and just allowing whatever impact that we can have happen to them. But the reciprocal is allowing those interactions to change us. And when we're so hyper focused on what we can do to change and impact other people, we never let God impact us, transform us. We never let those people have an impact on our lives.
There's the saying, I don't know where I heard it from, the saying is that we're really good at giving stuff over to God, but we're even better at taking it back. It's like, all right, God, you dug me out of the hole, and now I can take it. And I can imagine God going, no, you can't, which is why you got yourself in the hole to begin with.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to have that. For as much as we say we want that aha moment, and that we want the clouds to go with the big arrow that says "Eat it, Joe's" or whatever it says that we want to do, for as much as we beg for that, we also are terrified that we might get it.
Yeah.
That God says, I want you to go do this. And we and we pray for that and are terrified that God might actually do it.
And when we do get it, most people run from it.
Right. That's a Jonah story, man. We get it. We run.
We run directly away from it, right? Oh, I didn't want it like this, God. I wasn't ready for it.
Well, you asked for it.
And then in the same way, sometimes, we hand it over to God, and then we think about it for a little bit, and we say, okay, God, you're not doing that fast enough. Let me take it back from you.
Like, you aren't doing this. Let me show you how to do it.
Let me...
Here, pay attention.
I'll take my turn now, God.
Yeah, exactly.
You've taken too long.
Yeah, I think I got it. Right.
There's no way. It's really interesting. And the church is changing
Right.
as a whole. I mean, we're
Right.
seeing this isn't directly related to the pandemic, just related to in the last decade in general, but membership declining, tons of churches closing their doors, people turning away from the idea of Christianity as an organized religion, spirituality kind of as a whole. Where's the church go from here?
There has been only one other time I can think of that the church has sat on the precipice of history like it has now. And that's when it first started. To be in a spot now to where we really do get to define in a way that we haven't been able to before, at least in the Western world, to be able to talk about there's more and more people who are not associated with the religion now than who are. And it's different because it's not a blank canvas.
Right.
Because there's some people who think they know something about faith, and usually what they know is nothing great, or they'd be involved.
Yeah.
Or they think they've heard it. And so, and that can be terrifying. But just like I said before, I don't like, and as a person of faith, I'm not supposed to be a person of fear. So sometimes I have to remind myself of that too.
Yeah.
And because of that, then that means this is the opportunity. That the opportunity for the church to really do something. And it's a small thing, but I really think that churches, as they grow, are really going to have to learn to be more authentic about who they are. We were talking earlier about, my church can get tired of hearing me say it, but this is who we are, this is what we do, and this is why we do it. And part of that may lead to churches being a lot more niche. Where, you had kind of in this, from the 50s on, where the churches became these institutions that offered everything to everybody, and the churches competed in the town about who had the better program. But everybody had all the programs. We just have, because our church can't not have a music program or a youth program or whatever. We got to have that because these other churches have it too.
Right.
But I think now churches more and more are going to have to really zero in on this is our mission. And it's not that other things aren't good, and it doesn't mean that other things aren't needed. This is what we can do. And we're not going to be ashamed of this is what we can do. Sometimes, especially smaller churches, I hate the phrase, we're just a little church. I hate the phrase just.
Yeah.
Because just is an excuse to either be afraid, to think less of ourselves, to give permission to give permission to be afraid, and to be permission of being a little bit guarded. But we do that, and so we're just this. We can't do that. And some churches are really small, and they still use that because they think they have to be big, bold, and offer everything, and they're forgetting that, man, what you all do as a little country church, man, you love your neighbor really, really well, and you are there for them, and you practice hospitality in ways that can't be taught. You just are this, and you're there, and you cling, and you do that. And that may be okay, and that may be enough, and man, own that.
Yeah.
It also may be, this is a program that we can do because it fits our mission, and that's all we do. We don't worry about do we have, or we may do other things, but we're not worried about do they have to be all-encompassing or whatever. It's that we do this.
Right.
And that may change. It may be that this is what we're doing for this year. This is what we're going to pour into. I know of a church and that I don't think they still do it, but they did this kind of this cool concept where they would have the church would get together and go, what are some themes of areas that we want to work on or that we want to contribute to in our community? And so then the pastor or the outreach committee would find organizations that fit that theme. And then they would bring them into the church and have almost have like a pitch meeting of this is what our organization does, this is how we profit it. And then all the church members voted on this is the organization that we're going to help this year, and we're going to pour everything into that. And they did that every year. And there's part of me that goes, scratches my head because there's part of me that looks at that and goes, man, that just seems unfair. But there's a part of me that also goes, but how beautiful for a church to go, this is what we're doing. And so every bit of outreach, everything that we do is focused on this. And then next year, we'll do it again.
Right.
And so it's not a matter of going, well, we like to help you, but gee, sorry, we can't because we're doing this. It's knowing, no, this is who we are. This is what we do. And this is why we do it. And we've kind of set a timeline on it. We're going to do it for this long.
Okay.
And then the next year, we're going to look at it and we're going to go, you know what? We're going to pour all of our resources and do that. And what is happening is that some of the things that happened that the church did, some other people got passionate about going, I really like that. I want to know what I can do on my own to be able to help further what they're doing with it. I'm pretty sure that's called discipleship, where we train people, where we train people in an area to work. And they go off and they do that with this passion of going, this is my calling. This is where I can have impact. We do that. I think that's a beautiful thing. And churches as a whole don't operate that way because we've got to be everything to everybody to bring everybody in. And that's a hard mentality break. But I think the churches that are going to succeed going on will make that break. That will make that distinction of, we're going to do this, and we're not going to be ashamed of it. We're going to pour everything into it. We're going to be proud of it. We're going to recognize what it does for the community. We're going to recognize, and I think the churches that succeed will zero in on that and go, this is who we are. And if you're looking for another church that does something else, great. We know who that is. You need to be going over here. And there's nothing wrong with that. If this is what you're looking for, good. That's not what we do, but it's not bad. It's just not what we're doing. If you want to do that, this is who we are. If you want to do that, this is who they are. And to be able to be honest about that and to not look at it as, oh, but they were such a good family and look at the income they would have brought into our church. And go, no, be okay. This is who we are.
It's kingdom work. Just be free flowing about like that being a Christian and walking through faith. Like, this isn't a Christian podcast.
No.
Somebody else said that this week, and it was Tim Ross said that this week. As a pastor I follow, and he's got a podcast called The Basement. If you haven't seen The Basement, you should become a basement dweller and watch. But he was like, "This isn't a Christian podcast," and he just kept saying, "This isn't a Christian podcast. This is a podcast by some Christians."
Right.
Like, there is no bar of entry that says, I don't care if you're a Christian or not.
Right.
I don't care what your faith practice is. I don't care whether you're a woman or a man or however you identify. I don't care. I just care that you're willing to sit down at the table and have the conversation. And that's ultimately what it is. That's ultimately how we all grow.
Right.
And maybe you grow to know God and to see the way that God works in your life the way that we do. And maybe you don't. But at the end of the day, being open is the only way that we grow and evolve. And I think there's growth and evolution in conversation for everybody.
Yeah. And I think it is, to my sorrow and sadness, that people are unaware of, don't know how, have not seen the church as being the place where what you and I are doing right now should be happening. And for whatever reason, that disconnect happened. There's multiple reasons why.
Yeah.
From abuse in the church to hierarchies to structure to ritual. And it's not any one thing. It is all of it.
Yeah, the whole gambit.
And which is why it's really hard to go, well, if we just change this, we'll be okay. Well, you can change that, but then you got to really be okay to go with the downfall of like everything else that's built around that church.
Yeah.
But what was lost was just the idea that people could come in and be authentic. And part of the reason that happened is, frankly, it's us. Because we're the ones who are still looking at people in the church going, everything from, I can't believe you came in wearing that, to, I know who you are, what are you doing in here today? Or, I had an argument with you 15 years ago, and I am not willing to forgive you. And what's the argument about? I don't know, but I knew I was angry.
Yeah.
We're the ones who have to own that we are the reason why other people see Christians as not being authentic. And that's a hard thing to do.
Ownership is difficult,
Right. It is.
especially in this new world that we're in, right?
Right.
But I mean, that's the thing that I'm preaching. I'm going to continue to preach. And I think there's a yearning for accountability and some ownership, and a yearning for to be called, right? And ultimately, God ordains us to live lives of love and compassion, and to give grace just as much as we get it.
Right.
And that call is on your life, whether you acknowledge it or not.
And call is a weird word.
Yeah.
Because if you're in the church and you hear call, you think ministry.
Yeah.
If you're not in the church and you hear call, like, what the crap are you talking about? God wants me to go do whatever. I don't know if I even believe in this stuff. And you're telling me that God wants me, God has a plan or a call or a desire for me to do it. What are you talking about? But that you're right, that call of going, this is the place where I know you could be your best. This is the place where I know you would have the most impact. That God calling us into that place. And again, it may be a particular place for a particular season, or it may be this is your area or whatever. But for God to really call that, when you're there, jazz musicians call it about being in the flow of just letting the music just kind of take over and they become the instrument. Ministry is kind of that same way, is that when you are in that spot, you're just kind of the instrument at that spot, and God works. And that's a hard concept
Oh, yeah.
to take in for even those of us who know it. It's a hard
sure.
concept to get that over. And so, hey, God has a call for you. Like, what?
The hardest part is showing up. Though.
Right.
I mean, if you're willing to show up, you don't have to know all the answers. You don't have to understand what church is about or what faith is about. But if you're willing to show up and you're willing to keep showing up, God's going to make a way.
Right.
And that's for all of us that are struggling, that have doubt, that, are filled with those fears and that insecurity, that don't hear where God is calling us, that have church hurt and hurt from institutions, that don't know what's next.
Right.
Just show up.
Right.
Just show up and trust that in showing up and being available and allowing yourself to be vulnerable, that God's going to speak and God's going to move, and that there's going to be grace at the end of all of it. And it hasn't failed yet.
No.
It hasn't failed yet.
No, it hasn't. Structures may look different, and how it is presented may change, but God's word has not failed ever. And I think that's our, every time I hear somebody yelling about, if we do this, the church is gonna fall apart. Like, what part of what you just saw makes you think that that's bigger than God? The anger, whatever. Like, you really recognize what you said, but what could be threatened is the structure, the model that we're all used to, and we're not ready for that yet. But the more people talk about it, the more people are willing to talk, the more comfortable we become with there may be a different way to do this. There may be a better way to work in partnership with each other. There may be something, crazy thought, that I have to learn, and I'm learning it from you, how we have the conversation, instead of just coming into it going, look what I have to offer. I mean, I know that you were pretty excited about having me on today, but still, and I don't blame you. But that's part of it. But if I take that attitude seriously and into everything, then that ruins every bit of what I can learn and what I can see and how I get to really learn and grow from someone. And the problem is that's exactly what we've done, is that we've taken that concept of going, my time, my space, my availability, and you're right, it's precious, but are we giving it in ways that actually encourage other growth, or am I using it in times of, this makes me feel good? Yeah.
It's all about growing.
Right.
I'm so thankful for all of the time, Zane, for all of the insight and the wisdom. I mean, you have certainly been this instrument of God continually.
Appreciate that.
You've been this model to I can't even name the number of kids that you've been this model of the accessibility of God, right? Because especially when you're a kid, sometimes God can feel so inaccessible, and you've demonstrated that God is accessible on multiple levels. And just being a person that's open to learn and evolve and, really be present.
Appreciate that.
I appreciate that model.
I appreciate you doing this. I appreciate you. I appreciate the time and effort you're putting into this. And so thank you thank you seriously for asking me to do it. I appreciate that.
Of course. But this is Zane Whorton. I'm Michael. I'm so thankful that you have taken the time. Hopefully you've made it this far, but I'm thankful that you've watched and engaged with this podcast that's all about growing and evolving and becoming the best version of ourselves, because we understand that there's radical change that's needed in the world, right? That we need to evolve and pivot in some way or another. And in order for that change to happen, we're going to have to do some change within ourselves. And in order to combat the divisiveness of this world, we got to sit side by side and have those conversations and truly learn from each other. God is certainly moving in this place and in the world, and I hope that you've been blessed today.
Gotta be side by side. Give it up. Gotta be side by side. Everyone. Gotta be side by side. Yeah. We gotta be side by side.
What I do in that Talks to Tatum kind of deal,
Right.
that's not accessible to everybody. Me clipping something and putting it as a short is accessible to somebody in a way different way than
Right.
a 7-minute video, in a way different way than like this type of format, in a way different way than like, somebody may be incredibly receptive to me talking to a pastor about this issue versus me talking to
Right.
this person that does something completely different, and trying to approach it in as many different ways as I can and present as many different ideas and perspectives
Sure.
as I can, so that we can all get to this place that we're sitting and talking together.
Right.
And there's so much stuff that we just don't talk about. Theology,
Right.
faith practices,
Yeah.
worship. There's so many of these things we just don't talk about, like church structure, organization of things, community, interfaces, just chasing authenticity.
Right.
And so how the channel originated, and that's my whole pursuit. If I'm gonna be in ministry and I'm gonna do that,
Right.
then it's gonna be representative of the way that I walk through faith.
Right.
I can't do ministry and lead people and do those things in an inauthentic way.
Right.
It's got to mirror the way that I walk through my faith, and I walk through that faith with vulnerability
Right.
and being authentically me, and also being willing to surrender to where God is calling me, and not
Right.
being afraid to pivot if that's what's necessary.
Right.
And then being open that God may not be speaking through me, through this thing, or through this worship, or through this song. God may be speaking through this person, or through this text, or it does. I just have to be open and receptive to it.
Keep on evolving. Gotta be side by side.